process?
It's very simple. Honorato?
An 18% mixture of cocaine and ordinary gasoline.
Watch as we mix gasoline with cocaine to make the most expensive mud ever seen. In our other laboratory, we are currently working on a way to mix heroin with drain cleaner. Released in the summer of 1989, License to Kill was Timothy Dalton's only Bond movie. Now, before you go nuts in the comments correcting me, yes, I am fully aware he was the star of 1987's The Living Daylights. But that movie felt like a Roger Moore Bond film that happened to star Dalton. Granted, it's not as silly as the later Moore stuff, but it's certainly on par with his earlier movies.
It's all so boring here, Margot. There's nothing but playboys and tennis pros. If only I could find a real man.
I need to use your phone. She'll call you back.
Won't you join me?
When Dalton became Bond, he wanted to make an effort to bring the character back to his roots.
One of the interesting things about Bond is that he's just as bad as they are. I mean, the books come back to this theme time and again. He's just as bad. He's a murderer, a killer. Cold, cruel, ruthless killer. He just happens to be working for the side that's called good. Where Fleming is special is that he gives this man a completely opposite side and makes him very human and makes him one of us. And so we put ourselves in his place, but recognize that side to him which probably does lurk in all of us in some small degree or not. But oh yeah, he's as bad as they are.
License to Kill was the first time general audiences got to see a gritty version of James Bond. Sadly, it proved to be too far ahead of its time. Adjusting for inflation, License to Kill is easily the least successful Bond movie ever at the box office. Lots of people blame its lack of success on the competition that summer, including Batman and Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade. In fact, because of its poor performance, License to Kill was the last James Bond movie ever released in the summer. And while that may be a factor, it's more likely people just weren't ready for a new gritty Bond. The world would have to wait 17 years for Casino Royale to see the return of a gritty Bond. Timothy Dalton was the producer's favorite to play Bond for a while. Ironically, when Roger Moore finally dropped out, their first choice had shifted from Dalton to Pierce Brosnan. But due to Brosnan's Remington Steele contract, Dalton became Bond. Dalton played Bond in less movies than any other actor to take on the role in the official canon, with the exception of George Lazenby.
This never happened to the other fella.
License to Kill was the first Bond movie not based upon any written story by Ian Fleming. It's really ironic when you consider this is the film meant to return Bond closer to his book roots. But even though this film proved to be ahead of its time, it did have parts that were less than timeless. I don't want to harp on this too much because there are times where her performance is just fine.
If they start shooting, you just hit the deck and stay there.
Then there are other times when she's really pretty awful.
Look, pal, I was an army pilot. I have flown to the toughest hellholes in South America, and I will not have you lecture me about professionalism.
Of course, even at her worst, she's no Denise Richards.
Are you here for a reason? Or are you just hoping for a glimmer?
Or Tanya Roberts.
Well, are you, buying or selling?
Selling?
Horses.
Oh, no, I'm not interested in horses.
But those two set a rather low bar, and outperforming them is not saying that much. Part of Sanchez's plan for illegal transport of his cocaine is to mix it with gasoline. But even after the separation, you can clearly see the cocaine is muddy with gasoline. Could you imagine snorting something that smells like gasoline? It just simply wouldn't work well at all.
Mind if I have a swig of this?
Go right ahead.
What the hell is this stuff?
Gasoline.
But hey, I do like the poetic justice at the end when Sanchez gets that gasoline on him. Let me explain what Foley is. For all intents and purposes, it's sound effects. These movies have always had some fairly cartoony Foley.
Man talk.
And this movie shares that feature. Problem is, this movie is going for a gritty, more realistic angle. These sound effects distract hard from the scenes. Lots of people hate what this movie did to Felix, but I honestly feel they didn't go far enough. To make Bond dedicate himself on a mission of revenge against the orders of MI6, I felt the death of Felix would have been called for. Instead, he's just maimed and his wife, who we've never seen before, is killed. I know Felix is a noteworthy character in James Bond lore, but he's recast so often it's hard to keep track of him. Honestly, I wasn't sure if we were looking at the same character or if Fleming just liked the name Felix like Final Fantasy likes the name Sid. To give you an idea how often they recast this character, both Jeffrey Wright and David Hedison are tied for playing it the most times. They've each played the character twice. The character has appeared in 9 Eon James Bond movies, 11 if we count the unofficial movies. This is a character that changes so often that killing him would do nothing except allow the audience to really understand Bond's loss. It's not like his character will truly be missed, since a random CIA agent could easily take his place. But perhaps this movie wants to break the mold that anyone who is male who goes on a mission with Bond is sure to die. And it's really kind of refreshing to have a change like that, and oh wait, this movie certainly isn't trying to break that mold. Complete nonsense, including pointless salutes, fake Colombians,
Are you really Colombian?
genetically engineered fish,
Feed maggot to our special breed of genetically engineered fish. What do we have?
Sea bass.
Right.
They are mutated sea bass.
Really? Are they ill-tempered?
Absolutely.
Well, that's a start.
worms, my only weakness, oblivious dancer during a bar fight, Bond hooks up with a girl because Bond, copping concrete boobs. The villainous Wayne Newton. This really weird cut.
All right, I'll answer it.
Miss Kennedy, I saw you at the casino with James. We need to speak in private.
And, of course, what collection would be complete without winking stone fish? A big part of this story, and part of its selling point, is the idea that Bond has gone rogue from MI6. Sounds pretty cool, except they don't do anything with it. We get an MI6 agent going after him in one scene, then suddenly he's dead, and that's it. Bond doesn't do anything unusual in this movie. Back in Diamonds Are Forever, we see Bond going on a mission of revenge against Blofeld, and at no point does he need to go rogue. Yet when he goes after Sanchez here for similar reasons, suddenly he has to go rogue. And it just feels unnecessary. But that would be forgivable, except they don't do anything with this whole going rogue storyline. Nothing feels different except for the MI6 agent who just gets a cameo. So what's the point in having Bond go rogue? I had never seen this movie before I started looking at the James Bond movies earlier this year. This one was quite a surprise. I was expecting it to be one of the worst, and I enjoyed the crap out of it. I already brought up the flaws this movie has, and it has many more, but it's certainly enjoyable. It's not clear at all why this movie got such a poor reaction. This is another Bond movie that takes liberties with the Bond tropes like Casino Royale. Here both Bond girls live, and Q is never in his lab, but rather goes out into the field to make sure Bond has the gear he needs. It shows that Q and Bond are friends despite the back and forth between them.
Smile, boys.
Don't use the flash!
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the henchman in this movie is played by an extremely young Benicio del Toro, and only his second movie credit. The villain this time around is Sanchez, and he has no plans to conquer or destroy the world, which is always a nice change of pace in a Bond movie. I actually find it interesting how Sanchez talks about how he doesn't care for money.
And I'm gonna keep my word.
I don't like it. He can finger me. I spent a fortune on this cover.
Something you better understand, amigo. Loyalty is more important to me than money.
In his opinion, only loyalty is important, but he buys all his loyalty. No matter how much he says he doesn't care for money, he is completely dependent on it. It's just something I find fascinating. The Bond song this time is License to Kill by Gladys Knight. And it's a perfectly entertaining song when you're listening to it, but I find it literally has no staying power at all. As soon as the song's over, I just completely forget about it. But as a Bond song of the time, it does its job. I give this movie an 8 out of 10. However, I have trouble ranking this movie. I'm not sure if it's better or worse than Goldfinger. The flaws in Goldfinger were far worse, but I find it to be a much more fun film. Part of that is obvious. When you go for a gritty take, a lot of the fun goes out the window. But you have to replace the fun with raw quality to compensate. And while License to Kill has lots of quality to it, it's just not enough to overcome the fun of Goldfinger for me. Still, it's very close between these two.
Hey, if you like this video, please make sure to hit that like button and go ahead and subscribe. That helps me out a lot. And if you really love this video, consider visiting my Patreon page.